I always thought mirrors were just mirrors, nothing more than simple reflections. But that belief shattered the moment I moved into that old apartment. It was a cozy little place in a quiet part of the city, perfect for someone just starting out. The rent was cheap, and the landlord was friendly, though he did mention that the apartment had been vacant for a while. He seemed eager to get it rented, which in hindsight should have raised some red flags. But I didn't think much of it at the time. I should have listened. The apartment was nice enough: 2 bedrooms, a small living room, and an old bathroom with one of those antique-style mirrors above the sink. It was large, framed in dark wood with intricate carvings. A beautiful piece, really, but something about it made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way it seemed to stare at me whenever I passed by it. But again, I just chalked it up to my overactive imagination. The first few days were uneventful. I unpacked my things, settled in, and tried to make the apartment feel like home. But then, something strange happened. It started with the mirror. Every night, before I went to bed, I'd catch a glimpse of myself in it. But one night, as I was brushing my teeth, I noticed something strange in the reflection. The room behind me was dark, but I could see a shadow, just standing there, motionless, in the corner of the room. I froze. The shadow wasn't in the room when I turned around, but it was there, staring at me from the mirror. I quickly turned away, chalking it up to exhaustion. I hadn't been sleeping well, and my mind was probably playing tricks on me. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I ignored it for a few more days, trying to move on. But then the shadows started to change. Every time I looked into the mirror, they grew a little darker, a little more real. It wasn't just a shape anymore. It looked like a man, a tall figure, standing motionless in the corner, never moving. I knew I had to do something. But what? I wasn't exactly a believer in the supernatural, and this was all happening in the mirror, so it couldn't be real, right? But it was real. One night, I stood in front of the mirror, determined to confront whatever was lurking there. I took a deep breath and stared at my reflection. There was the man, standing in the corner, just as before. But this time, he wasn't just standing there. His face was visible. The man in the mirror was smiling. Not a normal smile. It was wide, twisted, like a grotesque mockery of happiness. His eyes were hollow, black voids that seemed to reach into my soul. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. My heart pounded in my chest, and the air in the room grew thick, suffocating. And then he spoke. "I'm here." The voice was low, almost a whisper, but it felt like it was coming from all around me, like the apartment itself was alive. My stomach churned with terror as the man's smile grew wider, his lips stretching unnaturally. I bolted from the room, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I slammed the bathroom door behind me and locked it, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the lock. For the rest of the night, I stayed awake, glued to the bathroom floor. I couldn't bring myself to leave. The next day, I called my best friend, trying to explain what happened. Of course, she thought I was just being paranoid. But I wasn't imagining this. I could feel it in my bones. The man in the mirror was real. I tried to ignore it. I tried to push it out of my mind, but it got worse. Every night, the man's presence grew more intense. He'd stand closer to me in the reflection, inch by inch, until one night, he was standing right behind me. I could see him as clearly as I saw myself. His long, thin fingers pressed against the glass, his face inches from mine, his cold breath fogging up the surface of the mirror. I couldn't escape him. Every time I closed my eyes, he was there. When I tried to look away, his gaze stayed with me. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a towel, soaked it in water, and wiped down the mirror, hoping to rid myself of whatever was causing this. But when I did, the reflection didn't change. Instead, the man stepped out of the mirror. I screamed and stumbled backward, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, silent and still, in the center of the bathroom. His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt my legs weaken beneath me. It was then that I noticed something else. His reflection was still in the mirror. Even though he was standing in front of me, I could see him clearly in the glass, his eyes still staring at me with that twisted, sick smile. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed with fear. Eventually, I backed out of the bathroom and ran to the front door. I couldn't stay there anymore. I left that night, leaving everything behind, including the apartment and the man in the mirror. I didn't go back for my things. I never will. To this day, I'm terrified of mirrors. I've since moved into a new place, But every time I pass by a reflective surface, I feel that same cold, crawling sensation along my spine. The man in the mirror, he's still out there. It was supposed to be a fresh start. After a rough breakup and a messy life in the city, I found a quiet little house on the outskirts of town. The rent was cheap, and the landlord was eager to get someone in. I didn't ask too many questions. I just needed a place to heal. The house was old, built in the 1920s, maybe earlier. It had that musty smell of aging wood and forgotten memories. But it was peaceful, with a small garden and a cozy living room with creaky floors. The kind of house that made you feel like you could start over. But from the very first night, something felt off. I noticed it when I was unpacking. As I carried my boxes into the living room, I caught a glimpse of something strange, a dark shape darting across the wall. It was so fast that I thought I'd imagined it, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. At first, I shrugged it off. The house was old. It could have been a trick of the light, or maybe a rodent scurrying through the walls. But the feeling stayed with me, like I wasn't alone, like someone, or something, was watching. As the days passed, things began to escalate. I'd hear strange noises at night, scratching sounds coming from the walls, like something was moving inside them. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, but the noises were too rhythmic, too deliberate. It wasn't a natural sound. It was as if something was trying to get out. One night, I decided to stay up late to figure it out. I sat in the living room, trying to ignore the unsettling silence that seemed to fill the house, when I heard it again. This time, it was louder, closer. I stood up and followed the noise. It was coming from behind the wall near the kitchen. Slowly, I approached, my heart pounding. The scratching stopped, and for a moment, there was complete silence. Then, I heard something even more terrifying, a voice. A whisper, soft and guttural, just barely audible, coming from behind the wall. It said one word, "Help." I stumbled back, my chest tight with fear. My mind raced. Could it be someone stuck behind the wall? Had someone been trapped there? But the house had been vacant for years. I was the first tenant in ages. I called the landlord the next morning, but he insisted everything was fine. "Old house," he said. "Lots of quirks. It happens." He even laughed it off, but something in his tone made me uneasy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to the noises growing louder, scratching, tapping, and that whisper, always just behind the wall. My fear started to turn into anger. I had to know what was going on. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way into the kitchen, where the sound seemed to be coming from. There was a spot in the wall where the paint had started to peel away, revealing a crack. It was barely noticeable, but as I shone the flashlight on it, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A thin, black slit running down the wall, almost like a doorway, but too narrow to open. Without thinking, I grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer and began to scrape at the wall. The more I scraped, the louder the noises got. It felt like something was on the other side, pushing against the wall, trying to break free. Then, suddenly, the wall gave way, and I fell backward onto the floor. What I saw was not what I expected. The hole I'd created revealed a small, narrow space, barely big enough for a person to squeeze into. The air smelled stale, musty, like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. But there was something else, something darker. The walls inside the cavity were covered in strange symbols, drawn hastily with what appeared to be dried blood. And at the far end of the space, there was something else, something that made my heart stop. A pair of eyes, glowing faintly in the dark. I froze, unable to move, my body locked in fear. The eyes blinked slowly, and for a split second, I thought I saw a figure move, just a shadow, but it was enough to send me into a panic. I scrambled to my feet and ran from the room, slamming the door behind me. I could still hear the scratching and whispering, but now, it felt closer, more intense, like it was right behind me. I didn't stay in the house much longer after that. I packed up everything I could and left the next morning, not even bothering to call the landlord. I don't know what I uncovered in that wall, but I knew I wasn't safe there anymore. I still don't know what was behind those walls, or what it wanted, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever it was, it's still out there, watching, waiting. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I can still hear it, scratching, whispering, calling out for help. I never believed in ghosts, not until I moved into the old house on Cedar Lane. I had just started my new job in the city, and after weeks of looking for a place to stay, I found a charming little cottage on the outskirts. It was cheap, too, far below market value. The real estate agent was eager to close the deal, but she didn't tell me much about the property's history, aside from mentioning that it had been vacant for a long time. I was desperate, and after a quick glance around, I convinced myself that it would be perfect for me. I moved in the following weekend, the weather turning chilly as autumn began to settle in. The house was quaint, nestled under a canopy of tall, creaking trees that seemed to whisper with the wind. The first night was uneventful, just the typical creaks and groans of an old house settling. I had heard those sounds before, but by the third night, I started to feel uncomfortable. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps. Soft, slow steps, coming from the hallway just outside my bedroom door. At first, I thought it was just the house settling again. But then, the footsteps stopped right outside my room. I lay still, my heart racing in my chest. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. There was something wrong. I finally mustered the courage to open my eyes, and there, in the dim light, I saw it. A shadow, standing just at the threshold of the door. It was tall, but shapeless, like smoke swirling in the dim glow of the hallway light. I blinked, trying to make sense of it, but the shadow didn't move. And then it did. It glided toward me, slow and deliberate, as if it had all the time in the world. My breath caught in my throat, and I sat up, heart pounding. I couldn't speak, couldn't scream, couldn't move a muscle. It was like the air around me thickened, pressing in on me, suffocating me. The shadow drew closer, and I felt its coldness seep into my skin. I could hear its footsteps, soft and almost echoing in the silence, drawing closer and closer. Just when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, the shadow stopped. Right at the foot of my bed. I don't know how long I lay there, unable to move, until I finally forced myself to get up and turn on the lights. When I did, the shadow was gone. But the room was still cold, and the air felt heavy. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I was exhausted but chalked it up to stress and lack of sleep. I was adjusting to a new place, a new city. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But that night, the footsteps returned. This time, I wasn't as shocked. I was still terrified, but I managed to open my eyes and listen carefully. The footsteps weren't as soft as before. They were more distinct, like someone was walking through the house, as if looking for something or someone. I grabbed my phone and texted my best friend, asking if she could come over. No response. The footsteps continued. They moved from room to room, slow and deliberate. There was something unnerving about the way they seemed to follow a pattern, always coming closer, never rushing, always deliberate. I decided to investigate. I crept out of bed and into the hallway, holding my phone's flashlight in front of me. The beam of light flickered and barely illuminated the dark corridor. I walked slowly toward the stairs, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever, or whoever, was making those sounds. The air grew colder the closer I got to the staircase, a bone-chilling cold that made my skin prickle with fear. I reached the bottom of the stairs and froze. At the foot of the staircase, there was a door that led into the cellar. The door was slightly ajar, and the shadows from within seemed to stretch out into the hallway. The footsteps had stopped. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my breath shallow and quick. I had to know what was in that cellar. My curiosity got the best of me, and despite every instinct telling me to turn around, I stepped toward the door. I pushed it open, the creak of the hinges echoing through the house. The cellar was dark, the kind of darkness that felt alive, like something was waiting. I shined my flashlight around the room, but the light only revealed the old wooden beams and cobwebs that clung to the walls. But then, something caught my eye. In the corner, near the far wall, there was a small, dusty box. It looked ancient, out of place, like it had been sitting there for years without anyone ever touching it. I felt drawn to it. I don't know why, but I had to open it. I picked up the box, dust falling off it as I pried it open. Inside, there was nothing but a few scraps of paper, yellowed and fragile. I unfolded one, holding it up to the light. It was a list. Names. And beside each name was a date. The first name was mine. The date? The day I had signed the lease on the house. The second name was the previous tenant, who had died in the house 5 years ago. The next name was someone else, someone who had lived there before him, and before that. Each name was followed by a date of death. My blood ran cold. I backed away, dropping the box to the floor with a crash. The cellar door slammed shut behind me, the force of it making the house shake. I turned to run, But before I could move, I heard a voice, soft, distant, but unmistakable. "You're next." I ran upstairs, locked myself in my bedroom, and never left the house for the rest of the night. When I woke up the next morning, everything seemed normal, but the air was still thick with unease. I packed up my things that day and left the house behind. I never looked back, but every now and then, when I'm alone, I still hear the footsteps.